They believed they could put a price on me. They believed they could put a price on Africa. They miscalculated. A few weeks ago, I received a message that shook me, not because of fear, but because of the arrogance it carried.
The rain fell in a slow, persistent drizzle that painted the streets with a sheen of silver under the dim glow of the lampposts. In a quiet corner of the city, far away from the noise of cameras and the restlessness of the press, two figures prepared to meet in secrecy. One was a man known across the world for his enduring grip on power, his name whispered in the halls of diplomacy. His reputation one of resilience, cunning, and at times, unyielding stubbornness, Benjamin Netanyahu. The other was a rising figure, enigmatic yet bold, whose influence had grown far beyond the borders of his homeland, shaking the established order of alliances and ideologies. Ibrahim Traoré. The world had changed rapidly in the past years. Old powers had begun to tremble, their certainties crumbling like ancient stone walls battered by the winds of a new era. Netanyahu, once the unmovable rock of his nation's politics, now found himself navigating a sea of shifting alliances and mounting crises. His allies were not as loyal as they once appeared, and his adversaries had grown bolder, sensing vulnerability where before there was only strength. Traoré, on the other hand, had risen like a storm. His words carried the weight of defiance. His actions inspired movements far beyond his borders, and his strategies, unorthodox as they seemed, had a tendency to work. The meeting was arranged in utmost secrecy, neither man willing to expose their vulnerabilities to the glare of the world. Netanyahu arrived first, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall of the abandoned villa that served as their meeting place. The air smelled faintly of old wood and rain-soaked earth. He adjusted his coat, the fabric heavy with the dampness of the night, and paced the room with a mind racing faster than the clock ticking on the wall. It was a rare moment for him, to be the one waiting, to be the one in need. Traoré entered quietly, his presence carrying a calm that seemed to unsettle the tension in the room. He did not rush, nor did he carry himself with the stiffness of a man entering hostile ground. His eyes were sharp, observant, the kind that weighed every movement, every hesitation. Netanyahu turned, forcing a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "You came," Netanyahu said, his voice lower than usual, almost weary. "I said I would," Traoré replied, his tone even unreadable. "What is it that brings you here like this, in the middle of the night, far from your own power?" Netanyahu hesitated. Pride was a fortress he had built around himself for decades, but tonight that fortress had cracks. He moved closer, as though reducing the distance between them would make his words easier to say. "I need your help," he said finally. Traoré's eyebrow arched slightly, not in surprise, but in curiosity. "Help," he repeated. "From me? Why?" The older man exhaled, the weight of his troubles pressing against his chest. The pressures of international politics, the storms gathering around his leadership, the fractures within his own alliances, these were not matters he could easily share with the world. But here, in this dimly lit room, he allowed some of the mask to fall. "Everything is shifting," Netanyahu began, his words deliberate. "The alliances I have counted on for decades, they are wavering. The hands that once shook mine with promises now pull away. Enemies gather at the edges, waiting for weakness. I have built much, held on through storms others could not survive, but the tide is changing, and I am not blind to it." Traoré remained silent, letting the words hang in the air. He understood the language of power, not the kind written in treaties or paraded in speeches, but the kind spoken in shadows, where desperation softened the hardest hearts. "I have watched you," Netanyahu continued. "You have managed to rise when others expected you to fall. You've turned pressure into strength. There is a force in you, something that commands loyalty, something that defies the usual game. I need to understand it. I need you, perhaps, to lend it to me." A flicker of something passed through Traoré's eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the balance of power had shifted in this moment. He moved to a chair, sat down, and folded his hands. "So, the man the world calls unshakable now comes to ask. Tell me, what would you have me do? What kind of help are you asking for?" Netanyahu paused, searching for the right words. Support, guidance, an alliance that cuts deeper than the public ones. I know the weight you carry among the emerging powers, the influence you wield where others cannot reach. I need that to steady the ground beneath my feet. Traoré leaned back, studying the man before him. And what do I gain from this? He asked, his voice calm, but his eyes piercing. There was the question that always came, the question on which all bargains rested. Netanyahu knew this was no act of charity he was asking for. He had built his career on calculated exchanges, and this one would be no different. You gain an ally who still holds keys to doors you have yet to open, Netanyahu said. You gain leverage where it matters, where the old still pretend to rule, but their grip weakens. The room was quiet for a long moment. The rain had slowed outside, its rhythm now a faint whisper against the windows. Traoré's fingers tapped lightly against the armrest of his chair, his thoughts running deep. You asked for help, Traoré said finally, but you also asked me to trust you. That is not easily given, not in times like these. You have fought many battles, some in the open, many in the shadows. Tell me, if I were to help you, would you stand by me when the world turns its gaze upon us both? Netanyahu met his eyes. For a moment, the politician's mask returned. Steel, determination, calculation. If you help me weather this storm, he said, then yes. I will not forget who stood with me when others turned away. Traoré rose, his expression still unreadable, but there was a sense of decision in his movement. We will see, he said. The world is changing, and perhaps there's a place where our paths align. But understand this. I do not give my hand for words alone. Show me action, and I will consider it. Netanyahu nodded, a subtle but significant gesture. The conversation had not ended, but something had shifted. A door had opened. Not fully, but enough to let the possibility in. The night carried on, their words stretching into the early hours. They spoke not as enemies nor as friends, but as two men who understood the currency of survival. One sought help to steady a throne that trembled. The other weighed the cost of extending his hand into a game that claimed many before him. When they finally parted, the rain had stopped, and the sky held the first pale hints of dawn. Netanyahu walked into the emerging light with a mind heavy but oddly steady. Traoré watched him go, the corners of his mouth tilting in a way that held both mystery and promise. The world would not know of this night. Not yet. But in that villa, beneath the weight of silence and rain, a story had begun. A story of pride lowered and help sought, of old power and new rising force meeting in the space between desperation and ambition.